Hey gang, using the promo code MTGMudsta, one word, all caps, will get you 10% off orders of $10 or more at Flipside Gaming, Original Magic Art, and orders of singles at Multizone. If they don't have what you're looking for, you could check out TCG Player and use my affiliate link to help support the channel. Looking for a way to bling out your deck and not spend a fortune? Alter Sleaze can help with that, and you can help with the channel at the same time by using my affiliate link. Or, if you're looking to join the Goblin Gang, you can always support me through Patreon. Alright, let's get into today's game. First up, we have Derek playing his Kadena deck, keeping a Temple of Mystery, Putrefy, Midnight Clock, Thran Dynamo, Farseek, an Overgrown Tomb, and a Swamp. Chris is playing his Azami deck, keeping Cavern of Souls, 2 Islands, Sower of Temptation, Patron Wizard, Mana Drain, and a Glenelendra Archmage. I am rocking Krenko, keeping a Beetleback Chief, 2 Snow-Covered Mountains, Goblin Lackey, Krenko's Command, Mog War Marshal, and Throne of the God Pharaoh. Mark is playing his Wort deck, keeping a Goblin War Chief, Chaos Warp, Skull Clamp, War Cadence, Forest, and Shivan Oasis. Mark wins the die roll and starts us off. Mark plays a tap Shivan Oasis. Derek plays a tap Temple of Mystery, Scrying 1. I play a Snow-Covered Mountain and tap it for a Goblin Lackey. Chris just plays an island. Mark plays a forest and he casts Skull Clamp. Derek plays a swamp and pays 2 mana for a Farseek. He goes to his library to find the land, passing while he does so. I play a Snow-Covered Mountain and go to combat. I hit Chris for 1, and with the on-damage trigger happening from my lackey, I put out a Beetleback Chief, who comes in and makes me 2 Goblin tokens. I then pass. Chris plays an island and passes. Mark plays a Cavern of Souls, naming goblins as it comes in, and then taps 3 for an uncounterable Goblin War Chief. He passes to Derek. Derek plays an Overgrown Tomb, taking 2 so it comes in untapped, and casts his Commander. He plays a Morph creature for free from his hand, drawing as it enters. I draw and go straight to combat. I swing my Goblin team at Chris again, dealing 5. My lackey lets me play at a Mog War Marshal for free, who enters and makes me another Goblin token. In my second main phase, I pay 2 mana to cast Throne of the God Pharaoh, and then pass my turn. This triggers the throne as we move to my end step, dealing 4 to all of my opponents. Chris plays a Polluted Delta, sacrificing it and taking 1 to go and find an island. He pays 3 mana for a Patron Wizard and then passes to Mark. Mark plays a Forest for turn and pays 1 to equip the War Chief with the Skull Clamp. Mark then pays 3 mana for a Kadama's Reach, passing as he goes to find a basic for the field and a basic for his hand. Derek untaps and draws, playing a tap Beseju who shelters all. 3 mana gets him a Midnight Clock, and he taps the rest of his mana for Sakura Tribe Elder. Moving to combat, Kadena goes at me, which I block with the Goblin War Marshal. As the War Marshal dies, I get a 1/1 Goblin token. Derek then plays a Morph creature in his second main phase, drawing as it enters from Kadena. I draw for turn and seem to be a bit stuck on lands. I need to attack because what's a goblin without a combat step, and go all out at Mark. Mark blocks the lackey with his War Chief, drawing 2 as it dies, but more importantly taking 6. In my second main phase, I then tap 2 mana for Krenko's Command, making 2 Goblin tokens, and then pass, which has my throne triggering and dealing 5 to my opponents. Chris plays a Cavern of Souls as well, naming wizards instead of goblins. He plays a Glenelendra Archmage and passes. Mark plays a Mountain for turn, and then taps out for Wort. He gets 2 Goblin tokens like some kind of copycat, and passes to Derek. Derek remembers at this point to add counters to his clock, and he plays a Forest. He then casts a Morph creature, drawing as it enters. Derek then claims he's going to help the table by tapping 3 mana to putrefy my throne. Derek then goes to combat, hitting me with his Commander and a Morph creature, and then passes turn. I draw and pay 2 more mana, casting a Kick Goblin Bushwhacker. I turn the team sideways, bringing them at Derek. Derek looks at his morphs and blocks the Beetleback Chief with the Elder and then sacrifices it before damage to go and find a land. He then takes 10 damage from the unblocked creatures, and I pass to Chris. Chris drops an island for turn, and now has enough mana to cast Azami, which he does, and passes. Mark plays a mountain, and Derek remembers to add up his counters to the clock. Mark then casts a Chaos Warp, targeting the clock, and as Derek gains priority, he morphs face up his Willbender, changing the target of the spell to Wort. With another cycle of priority going around the table, Mark responds once he can with the Beast Within, conspiring the spell as he casts it by tapping his 2 Goblin tokens. He targets Kadena and the unrevealed Morph card. Derek responds once he gains priority, using his Beseiju and taking 2 from it to help cast Reality Shift on his Morph creature. He exiles the creature and manifests his top card, drawing from Kadena seeing it enter. The Beast Within then resolves, destroying Derek's commander and giving Derek a 3/3 beast, and Wort then goes to the command zone. Mark still gets to shuffle his library and reveal the top card, and he reveals a mountain which comes into play. Mark then equips his Goblin token with a Skull Clamp, drawing 2 as it dies, and passing to Derek. Derek plays a Swamp for turn and recasts his commander. Mark responds to this, getting some revenge with a red Elemental Blast to counter the spell. This resolves, and Derek then goes to combat, hitting Mark for 3. I draw, and still can't find a land. I cast Skull Clamp at least, which resolves, but probably out of pity for me, and I then clamp a token, drawing 2. I then pass to Chris, and at the end of my turn, he taps 3 wizards to draw 3 cards. Chris plays an island, and then takes 2 life loss rather than pay the mana for a Gitaxian Probe. He looks at Derek's hand, and draws a card. We then see a Jace Friend's Prodigy hitting the stack, followed by a Vidalcan Aether Mage once the Flipwalker resolves. Chris then passes to Mark. Mark plays another mountain for turn, he then recasts Wort, and makes 2 more Goblin tokens as she enters, and passes to Derek. Derek adds the counters on his clock, and puts the last one needed on his upkeep. He exiles it and shuffles his hand into his library, and draws 7 fresh cards. He plays a Force for turn, and looks at his face down cards. We then see him tap out completely, taking 2 from Beseiju, and he targets Chris with a big old Villainous Wealth. Chris reveals some pretty average hits, mostly generic wizards and or counterspells. Derek decides to take the 2 wizards, and then passes to me. I draw and play a Ghost Quarter for turn, finally a land. I cast a Cheering Fanatic, and then clamp a token to draw 2 more cards. I pass, and at the end of turn, Chris taps his wizards to draw 5 cards. Chris plays an island for turn, and uses his Cavern to help cast a Stonybrook Banneret. He then taps another blue to cast Brainstorm, drawing 3 more cards and putting 2 back. Chris then digs some more, tapping Jace to draw a card and discard a card which he knew was a land. We then see him dropping a Fate Stitcher, and he passes to Mark. Mark untaps and draws. He plays a tapped Kazandu Refuge, which gains him 1 life as it enters. Mark then taps enough for a Beastmaster Ascension, which has Chris responding, countering it with the Glenelender's Archmage's ability. With that ability on the stack, Mark then pays 1 red to conspire a Brightstone Ritual, counting up to 9 goblins on the field. He resolves the copy and the original, gaining him 18 red mana, and the Glenelender Archmage then returns from her Persist trigger. Mark then uses 4 red to cast a Slate of Ancestry, and then taps 1 green as he casts Xenagos. He pays 3 more mana for a War Cadence, and once that hits the field, activates the Slate to discard his hand and draw cards equal to the number of creatures he has, or in this case, 4. He then taps the Cavern and uses the last floating mana to cast a Goblin Raise Runners, and passes to Derek. Derek drops a Swamp for turn and looks at one of his morphs. He then pays enough for Whisperwood Elemental, and then taps 2 for Rampant Growth to go and find a basic. He activates one of the stolen wizards from Chris to have Chris mill his top 3, and he then passes turn, and manifests his top card from the Whisperwood trigger. I play a Snow-Covered Mountain, and tap 3 mana for Heraldic Banner, picking red as it enters. Mark makes a deal with me since we're both in the Goblin Gang, and activates his War Cadence to make it so controllers of creatures must pay 2 to block per creature. This lets me go all out at Chris, who's been drawing like a maniac, plus he's in blue. He takes the hit for 11, and with the Cheering Fanatic attacking, I get to name a card. I name a Goblin Piledriver, which I then cast in my post-combat main phase for only 1 red. Chris then taps all of his wizards at my end of turn to draw that many cards. Chris then draws for turn and thinks about what to do. He activates Jace, drawing and discarding an island, before transforming Jace into his Planeswalker side. He downticks the Walker, giving Brainstorm Flashback, which he casts. He then casts a Mana Crypt, tapping it for mana, and then untapping it with the Fate Stitcher, before tapping even more to cast a Mind Over Matter. As I gain priority, I cast a Pyroblast to try and counter the combo piece, but Chris is ready, paying 1 for a Flusterstorm. Chris then realizes he has no mana to really protect his combo at this point, and quietly passes, discarding down to 7, and hoping to live through a cycle around the table. Mark untaps and counts up his creatures. He activates the slate once more, discarding his hand and drawing 6 cards now. Mark then casts a Kiki Jiki, using his Cavern to make it uncounterable. Chris responds to this by tapping a wizard to draw a card with Azami. He then discards a card to Mind Over Matter, and is able to go deep into his library through this combo, repeating this until he's 1 card left. Mark then gives Wort the Xenagos trigger, and swings her and Xenagos at Chris. Chris blocks with 2 of the least impactful wizards at this point to stop the damage, and in Mark's second main phase, he clamps a token to draw 2, and passes. Derek draws and plays an island. He looks at his morphs and checks out Mark's graveyard. He taps a good chunk of mana to turn face up 1000 Winds, returning to hand all other tapped creatures. Chris responds with the ability on the stack by discarding a card to Mind Over Matter and untaps his Fate Stitcher. Derek then goes to combat, swinging 16 points worth of face up and face down creatures at me, which I have no choice but to take. He then passes. I draw and play a snow-covered mountain. Treasonous Ogre then hits the stack. It then resolves, and I activate it 4 times, making 4 red mana and losing 12 life to cast Krenko. Once he gains priority, Derek puts to stack a mana drain, but Chris responds tapping a wizard with the Patron Wizard's ability to counter it unless Derek pays 1. Chris warns he can do this several more times if need be, provided I don't attack him. With Krenko still in the stack, Chris then begins to discard some cards to untap lands, and after a second activation of Mind Over Matter, Derek uses the Mill ability to target Chris. With that ability on the stack, Snapcaster Mage is flashed out, giving Cyclonic Rift flashback, which Chris uses on his Stolen Milling Wizard. Sadly, the ability still happens, and Chris mills his island. Krenko then finally resolves, and I lose another 3 life to make 1 red with the Ogre and cast Fervor. Chris then offers to tap down Derek's stuff again if I don't attack him, and I agree. I tap Krenko to make 2 Goblin tokens, and Chris discards 3 cards to tap down Derek's blockers. With the Epheto Alchemist being targeted, Derek activates it and untaps his 1000 Winds, and Chris discards his last card to tap it anyway, since he's dead no matter what. I then swing my board at Derek for 13 once the Piledriver gets its pumps, and it takes him out, and with Chris being dead either way, I sadly realize that after this I've left myself completely open to Mark's board, and I have no choice but to concede to him. Game review time. So, do you know what's really good to have in a 99 card deck? Lands. You know what's even better? Drawing some of them, which I didn't do this game. Unlike me though, Chris seemed to certainly draw into lands and was able to play them, and his Azami deck was able to go off, kind of, but he wasn't able to seal the deal. It seemed as though a lot of his good counterspells or his protection spells had been used earlier on, and by the time that he got to Mind Over Matter, he was a little bit defenseless. I think Mark was in a perfect position this game, because he wasn't really going to be hindered had a board wipe come around and taken Derek and my creatures out. Not to mention, if he drew into 1 large X spell, he could have easily taken Derek and I both out at the same time if he conspired it. Derek's Kadena deck continues to prove to be pretty sweet, and I love Morph, and I'm really tempted to build this deck. She's well costed, has a great effect, and at the same time forces you into a very specific type of archetype, which is something I enjoy building around. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.